Hello and welcome to another episode of Pokémath. Long time no see, and we are now at episode 53. And today we're going to be talking about the latest EUIC, and more specifically talking about this Umbreon control, stall, wall, call it what you want. You know what? I'm going to let the real expert talk about this in this episode because I am joined by no other than Sander Wojcik. Hello, Sander, and thanks for joining.
Hello, Stefan. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure
Uh,
joining in for a discussion. So,
I love having you for these kind of discussions here, and I also hope that people enjoy them. Well, they can always let us know if they really don't like it, but I think this one is going to be really interesting. Given that how UIC actually went, it was quite fun and really good to be back IRL as well, but also back and play something a little more out of the box. And as we discuss the deck here and your tournament run and more the intricacies to the deck, people will hopefully also notice how thin of a line you were walking with this event because it was really a meta call. I would call it like that. Really a meta call. But yeah, no, that was the introduction for today, guys. So let's just carry over. And as you can see on my screen here, everyone, you can see up here I have the deck. And but before we go into the deck, let's talk about the tournament run first. So, Sander, how did it go?
uh, well, my tournament started out pretty rough because I was feeling a bit sick. I did test negative for COVID, but I definitely had some type of other, I don't know, influenza. Who knows?
Ouch.
So that was not a great start. And then in the first round, I actually immediately played quite bad. I played against Arceus Dark, so with Moltres and Moltres V. But what happened is my opponent had a very slow start. I got my Jolteon into play before he got his Arceus V Star into play. So he only had the Arceus V Star with 3 energies on it. And no, I mean he had the basic V with 3 energies on it, not even the V Star.
Hmm.
And I had Jolteon in place, so he couldn't use his intelligence to find anything. And he really was not doing. He was just troll bossing.
Oh, so
So
you
I
got
was,
a really good start there, actually.
yeah, yeah. That was like, it was like the best possible start, I guess. So I was like, well, I might as well start attacking. So I put 3 energies on my Umbreon, and I boss up his Arceus because it was on the bench, and I hit it for 200. And he on his turn he just draws and he uses Power Edge for 130. So my Umbreon takes 130, and then on my turn, and this is actually the mistake that I made. I was so I was not really thinking it through. I was just like, oh, I'll just take the easy route, and which is sometimes something you definitely shouldn't. Like if you are in a strong position, you should just make sure there's no way you're losing. So actually, his Arceus had 200 damage, and it was the basic, not the V-Star. So it only had 20 left, so I could just finish it off with Eldegoss. If I digged a little bit deeper, I could just retreat my Umbreon and heal it. I could do a couple different things. But what I did, I just attacked again, right, with my Umbreon VMAX in the
Yeah.
active. So I KO his Arceus, and his board is just Sobble, Sobble, and the Galarian Moltres with no energies on it. But on his turn, he goes Moltres V, attach an energy from the discard to it, attach an energy from hand to it, Raihan to it,
Oh,
and Raihan for an air balloon, so he can retreat his active. This was all of this was with the uh,
with Jolteon in
what
play, right?
with the
Yeah.
Jolteon in play, and he didn't do anything for a couple turns.
Oh,
So he
that
had
okay.
Moltres,
Ouch.
Energy, Raihan, then he got the air balloon. He retreated, and the Moltres does 190. And because my Umbreon had 130 on it from Power Edge, it's actually a 2-shot. So he takes 3 prizes, and I lose my Umbreon, I lose my attacker, and my deck really isn't built in the first place to really stream attackers. So I basically lose my pressure, and he draws prizes. Of course, he draws 3 prizes. And he has no pressure on him anymore. So and he has used no bosses. And at this point, I have my Jolteon in play, and I also have like a Snorlax and a Jirachi or something. So I have 3 1 prizers in play. My opponent, I mean, I can assume has double boss and a ball pet still left because he hasn't played almost any cards. So when he KOs my Umbreon with the Raihan Moltres, I instantly realized I completely, overplayed my position. Kind of, I kind of played in a way that was like basically the only way I could lose. If I just hit his Arceus for 200 with Umbreon, and then when he return hits me, I should never put my Umbreon VMAX in a position where he can KO it. Because with this deck, if you do let your Umbreon get KO'd, you basically always lose.
Yes, that is
So,
correct.
anyways, the game goes on for a while, and he still has to like find boss KO on my Jolteon, and at some point it also becomes a bit problematic that I took the prizes on his Arceus, because at some point I also KO his Moltres V, because his Moltres V does 30 to itself, and when I Eldegoss hit it, my Eldegoss will do 60 because of weakness. So in 3 turns time, his Moltres actually gets KO'd, or maybe 4 turns. So I've taken 2 prizes on his Arceus and 2 prizes on his Moltres, like way ahead of schedule. Like normally you do take prizes, but not that quickly. So pretty early on, his baby Moltres actually also
Yeah, it does a
can do like
significant amount of damage. Also
can
becomes a real
do
threat.
it can do like 220 and 250 with the choice belt, and then in the end, I mean, I letting my VMAX get KO'd actually just is, from that point on, it's I mean, I basically know that if I do nothing at all, I am actually gonna lose the game, because he can just, I cannot get into the loop because he can just boss 3 times because I lost the VMAX. So I basically have to
yeah.
I have to win via prizes in a very weird way, and yeah, I mean, it was just very bad game by me.
It happens, Sander. It happens. I think we all have a story or two to tell about mistakes were made. And sorry for that, guys. No, a lot of you have already seen Sander play on stream as well. And let's fast forward a little bit, Sander, because
Yeah,
if I remember correctly, you finished up at 39th place on day 2 as well. So it was not a bad result at all. A top 64. Well done. Congratulations.
yeah.
And
So to really summarize the rest of my day 1, I actually I played round 1 against Arceus Dark, and then the next, I would say, until I played on stream, which was round 8. So my next 7 rounds are Mew. I played 7 Mews in a row, I
wait
think.
a second. You
Yeah,
played
6. I played 6. I played 6.
six Mews
I
in
played
a
6
row,
Mews in a
basically.
row. Yeah, so I went. I lost my first round, and then I won against 5 Mews, and I tied 1 Mew, and then I played on stream against Arceus again.
So for people
And
who don't know this deck, Mew is actually considered a really good matchup, provided one little condition, but you're probably
yes,
gonna get into
yes,
that condition in
we
a
are gonna
moment.
get So the Mew matchup. I'm sure we will talk about it, but there's to make like there's a bit more detail to the Mew matchup, but to put it really simple,
Yeah.
I would say if you start anything besides Umbreon, you are favorites.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start Umbreon, and I mean, you can start Umbreon and have like an amazing hand. Like if you have the double turbo to retreat into a Snorlax, and you have a badge really early on, it's still
Exactly.
fine.
Yeah.
If you have an amazing hand, you can start Umbreon and it's fine. But if you don't have an amazing hand, it's pretty bad. Especially if you play Echoing Horn, and most Mews still play Echoing Horn.
Yes. Yes.
Because you really, against Mew, want to play this game where you will use 5 1-prisers, use your Snorlax to draw cards, another Snorlax to draw cards, maybe a Starly to pick up some pieces. You use double Yveltal, and in the meanwhile, you are just, building up this Umbreon in the back that is actually capable of sweeping their field into attacks. Like into attacks, you can KO 2 VMAXs. And even if they only have, uh, 1 VMAX in play, I also found it pretty relevant that if they try to like Psychic Leap to like
Mm-hmm.
preserve their energies, like Psychic Leap for poke damage,
Yeah.
and put their energy into the deck because they don't want to get hit by Yveltal or Flannery. They only have like 1 Mew in play, and you can just boss KO the Mew, or you can use the Umbreon ability to KO it.
Yeah,
But
this is something I think also gonna come into, like what this deck really does. It makes the maximum use of a card, like in any possible way. I think
yeah,
that
yeah,
that's one thing I found so amazing about this deck. But yeah, you played against a lot of Mews, and even on day 2, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly.
So on day 1, I was 5-1-1 because I played against 6 Meals after
Yeah.
losing round 1, and then I played on stream. And the stream game, uh, I mean, you really see the game plan against the Arceus decks, and that is how you should play it. So I'm happy that you can kind of see the deck like in full gear. I think the stream games were the plan A, the main game plan of the deck. You could really see it in showcase. Also because my draw worked out pretty well, so I could actually play it like extremely safe by putting my badges on the Umbreons when you bench them, because
Mhm.
I think in almost every matchup you cannot really afford to lose too many prizes, right? A lot of the deck is about denying prizes. So if you bench an Umbreon and they have a boss KO sequence, even with Arceus, they can like V-Star for choice belt, so they can hit 210, and then they can V-Star for choice belt boss, and then they could potentially KO an Umbreon V when you bench it. So you really want the Sun and Moon badge. That's why we played 3, even though in the late game loop you only need 1 Sun and Moon badge. But having the badge against Arceus to protect your Umbreons when you bench it, and also against Mew. Because, like I said before, against Mew, you also really can't afford to give up like the double prizes on a fee. So you also really need the Sun and Moon badge on any Umbreon you put on.
That is true. That is
So,
true. It's very rare you can get away with just benching Umbreon randomly. Actually, it really
yeah,
depends on the board state, but
it
often
really
no.
depends sometimes, especially if you go like first, or if you're playing against Arceus and they don't find the turn 1 Arceus, or they don't find the attachment, because if they don't have an attachment, they
Eh,
usually they need a lot.
yeah,
So
it's something that it really have to be cautious. It's possible, but normally just don't do it.
yeah, yeah. I guess against like Malamar, or even against Urshifu, like against Urshifu, I think against Urshifu you don't even use the Sun and Moon badge actually,
Not
because
really, no. But what
but
happened? What happened at the end, Sander? Because when knowing this deck and it looks pretty well, you had a complete Muse straight up, and yeah, you went to day 2 again, super good, and even on day 2 you had quite some Muse. What happened? What went wrong?
um, well, basically, I think it's a combination of me not playing uh, super well. I mean, I was playing all right. I think I was playing. I was still pretty ill, so my concentration wasn't super high. And I played against 4 Meals on on day 2 as well, and 1 Whimsicott. So Whimsicott is an auto loss because they prevent you from using Eldegoss, and without you can also cannot attack with Umbreon. So
No, indeed,
Whimsicott,
as indeed.
yeah. So that's actually also, I guess we'll get into it later. But for the meta position of the deck, that is not great. That Whimsicott is like a good deck against Urshifu, and Urshifu seems popular now. So if
Mhm.
there's Whimsicott to counter Urshifu, then we also have a new bad matchup. But anyways, in day 2 I played against 4 Mews, and I started Umbreon I think 5 or 6 times against Mews.
Yeah, that's
So
ow, ow, ow.
yeah, and the games were still really close, and if you start Umbreon and they get like the turn 1 Malouetta, I think you can. I think it's pretty safe to just scoop. I mean, you can sometimes play it out to see if they play like Psych Energy or not. Like sometimes you can see a little bit up from their deck. But I think starting Umbreon, and if Mew has like the perfect, like the super strong start. I mean, it depends a little bit, because against Yveltal, actually going for the turn, like if Mew goes second and they go for the turn 1 Elisa's for triple fusion energy,
Yeah,
it's actually, it plays directly into the Yveltal, right? So I would say normally it's actually a bad play for Mew to even attempt to
but they have
do
enough
the.
resources by knocking out a V and playing Echoing Horn, of course, because then
Yes,
then
yeah,
they
that
can
that is
feed
that is
just
like
enough.
that actually was like in my round, like my third round of day 2, so I guess round 12. In game 3, I started Umbreon, but I could kind of get a hold of the game and slow him down, because Neil sometimes has a rough time against the Flannerys and the Yveltals. so I could kind of stabilize, but I still had the basic V in my discards. So we actually got to the point where I built up my an Umbreon VMAX, and I one-shot his Mew VMAX, and he needed 2 prizes, and I needed 3 prizes, and he was not in my Umbreon, because with the shopping center, you can actually swap. You bench the Umbreon, and you put the Sun and Moon badge to protect it on the bench. When you start attacking with it, you swap the Sun and Moon badge for a big charm, and then they need all 5 modifiers to one-shot it, so it's pretty difficult.
It
Especially if
makes
they want to.
Umbreon super tanky, which was also one of the
Yeah,
super awesome points. I don't know if you played back then, you probably did, Sander, but this when you play against Mew with this deck, it feels like you're playing Primal
yeah,
Groudon, if you remember
it,
that.
yeah. I think Mace also mentioned it also because the Snorlax is very similar to Tropical Beach. I mean, it's the same effect, right? So
Exactly
it
the
feels
same
like you're
effect.
just you're beaching and you're building your extremely strong attacker.
Yeah, and because of the Sun and Moon badge, which is one of the really good
Yeah,
things about this deck, it literally had the same effect as the Asian trait that Primal Groudon had. So they,
yeah.
and that happened a few. I don't know how many times
I
that
think I think
happened to you that they tried to boss it, and then yeah, it doesn't work. But boss is still played.
yeah. It happened only one time, and I think even in that game it was like I don't think it was relevant. I think that game was already like kind of like lost before that, and then they tried to bust Umbreon, and it didn't work.
So
But
you ended in 39th place. What score was that, Sander, if you remember?
I think it's 8-4-2, 8-4-2. I think
And yeah, a very good
uh,
score.
20,
And if I remember
25,
correct, you were not the
26
only one
actually.
playing this, of course.
Yeah, we had
Bes-
another excellent. We had a couple players playing it, and one of them is Stefan.
Hi.
Stefan here. I
No,
think we.
it was really fun to also like when you first came with this. So let me just first start off by saying Sander's idea. Not gonna claim anything here. Sander's idea. A few weeks before the event, 2 to 3 weeks, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. You came and said, I got this Umbreon deck. And us listening, oh, Sander has some kind of crazy idea again. Okay, um, let us know what is this. And then a very rough version of Umbreon came out, and yeah, we started immediately like, well, my favorite thing to do is always criticize the list and say like, we need to do this and this and that. It doesn't beat this and this and that, and
Play devil's advocate, like, it's
exactly.
bad,
And
it's bad.
one of my absolute
That's
favorite
good.
things to do when I get a deck in from you and saying, you know what, there's a lot of problems here, and while some of my things are just random, sometimes they help a bit. And we were a nice group. We ended up being 5 people playing this deck. So besides you and me, we had David Oldhoff, and we had Mace and Matthias Lupa as well. So unfortunately, the 3 others, they didn't make day 2. They had some, as we're gonna go into. They really they didn't hit the matchups that you want to see. Because we also learned that there are some matchups that some were obvious that you couldn't beat, and others you kind of, as you went on, you realize this is actually not that good. um, so I also had a run with the deck, and it was super fun. First of all, but I didn't meet that much Mew. I'm gonna say I ended up at 48th place, um, and doing all my matchups, I met Mew 3 times, twice on the first day and 1 time on the second day in my final round. I had a bye, which in the second day, which was fantastic. Couldn't come any better. And I had 1 Malamar, and I think 1 Dark Inteleon, so no Urshifu, no Arceus, just dark stuff, and maybe there was also a Galarian Zapdos V in there, such things. And the rest was just Arceus variants. We knew that they could deal with most Arceus variants, but I was still surprised about the amount of Arceus. It was rather
Yep.
extreme, and I opened really poorly on the day, so I lose my first round against Arceus Bibarel, um, due to a mistake on my own end. It was, yeah, I still need to wake up, and this deck requires a little more than just autopilot to play sometimes, and I forgot the fact that it's very good you batch your Umbreons, but once you want to go into the loop, which we're going to go in a moment, I guess, Sander really wants to talk about that, then you need your shopping center to swap one of the badges with a balloon to make this really, really work. I forgot that my shopping center was priced and didn't prioritize going to get it with a Peonia earlier in the game, and that kind of cost me the game. And you don't get the time to try again. So that was a loss. I win against Malamar in my second round, so I'm 1-1. Okay, fine. Then I lose my third round against something I never expected. So it was an Arceus player. We open and I think, okay, we're going for the loop. This is going to be great. He proceeds to bench a Blissey. And then I go, okay. Uh-oh.
How much damage does to do again?
Yeah, no, so first I looked
A
at the
lot.
Blissey and I was thinking like, okay, if I can cap it somehow, I can do it. But the problem is, this guy has correctly played. He plays, of course, 4 DTEs. We can sort of deal with that a little bit, but the problem with Blissey is it pulls up the energy again, even if you discard
it
it.
just keeps coming back, right?
And then
Even with
indeed, it was terrible.
we would need Faba
Yeah,
against
we would
Blissey.
definitely need Faber to lost zone the things. And then I think the game ended with, it was still a very long game, because I really just wanted to give it a go. But it ended up, Blissey ended up doing like 400 damage or something like that. So it's like
if you have in the double turbos, even boosted even.
Indeed. So I was 1-2, and then the fourth round I meet another Arceus, and I get into the loop the first game, and it works, and the person concedes, and we go to game 2. And then later in that game 2, I was like, okay, I got 1 prize more to spare, just to be sure against Escape Rope, because you don't want to see Escape Rope. I didn't see it in the first game, but I was not sure. So I bench an extra Snorlax. I thought like, this is fine. Then he goes down to the 1 prize. I'm in my loop. He proceeds to play Echoing Horn for a tie. And then that surprised me to see an Echoing Horn, of course, in Arceus. Not what you expected. Good play of my opponent for sure, and a really good call against our deck here. So at that point I'm 1-2-1, and I basically have to win 5 straight games, which fortunately happened. A combination of meeting some Mews finally, not starting Umbreon, and otherwise some very close games where also at some point I found myself just doing what Sander was trying to explain is not a good idea. Don't just charge up your Umbreon and try to plow them down using Max Darkness. Yeah, that happened, because at some point
Sometimes you have to.
I was sitting there like, this is not the plan, but yeah, let's go for it. His board was a Galarian Moltres V. I poked on it with an Eldegoss and knocked it out eventually, and then it seemed like, okay, he got to knock out enough price, so this got really dangerous. And then at some point I found myself just going up with Umbreon, play Marnie, hit and pray. And next turn, Eldegoss down, pick up Marnie, play Marnie, hit and pray. And it fortunately worked out, but it was not the way it's supposed to go, but sometimes that happens. And then I proceeded to meet Urshifu on the next day, and Sander and I already knew Urshifu's perhaps not your best matchup at all, especially when they know exactly what is coming. So I played against Mr. Szymanski, Alex, and he played the game perfectly. He knew exactly when to pressure, how many damage counters to put where and there, and set up the knockout eventually. The game did get interesting because he prized Persimmon, if I remember correctly, and it was really a really nice game to play, and it got really intense. But yeah, played perfectly from his end, and hence why it didn't go that well. I also learned on the second day, do not open Pyukumuku and proceed to say pass. It's a very bad strategy and shouldn't be recommended. And besides that, the deck finally started to work again on the second day. Unfortunately, still lost my third round. And then the fourth round I got a bye, and the final round I got to play against Mew. And to my opponent's defense, I have never seen as poor draw in my entire career playing against, well, in this case Mew. It's easy to say because Mew has not been around that long, but the draw was exceptionally poor. It was, I think, that could have lost to anything, given how poor the draws were. So fortunately ended up at 48th and in the top 64, because we had the option of still being outside top 64 at the end of the second day, which would have been very unfortunate. No, so that was the run both Sander and I had, and I think a lot of people that will be very interested in hearing a little more about now, Sander. How does this actually work? What are we looking at? So I have the list in front of me, and I would invite you, Sander, to simply say, where should we start?
Yeah, where do we start? I guess the start to the start of the deck really is of course the Eldegoss. I think it's
Yes.
the key component. And then I think if you look at the deck and I say the most important card is the Eldegoss, the first thing you notice is that there's only one.
Yeah.
So that might seem a bit strange, but so to really okay, so with the Eldegoss loop, I and Stefan we have talked about with each other. We've talked about the Eldegoss a lot, so I
Yeah.
think some of these things that I'm going to mention are very familiar to Stefan and I. With the Eldegoss loop, what you're essentially doing when you reach the late game loop, and with late game loop I mean when you're in a position that you have actually drawn your whole deck,
Mm-hmm.
and you have Eldegoss and double turbo, and you have some way to pivot, so you can attack. If you can attack with Eldegoss every turn, but what you're doing is you're attacking with Eldegoss, putting it back into your deck. Then when you draw it, you will put it down, and you will use the ability to get a supporter, and you will attack again and shuffle it into your deck. But you're shuffling in two cards, the Eldegoss and the double turbo. And on your turn, you're only drawing one card.
Correct.
So if you have no extra card draw, if you have if the only thing you have access to is the draw for turn, in 2 turns time you'll draw the Eldegoss and the double turbo, put it into play, and shuffle it back in. And in 2 turns time you'll get one free supporter.
Yep.
Except one way to really think about this Eldegoss loop is when you're deck out and you're attacking with Eldegoss, basically your deck is just an unlimited supply of Eldegoss and double turbo. And the combination of those two cards will give you one free supporter. So when you are in this late game loop, basically what happens is every 2 cards that you draw will give you one free supporter. And I think this is like a very helpful way to kind of conceptualize and kind of understand what the actual value is and the actual process of this loop. Because I've compared it to Lucamine, but I think it's a little bit different because of this thing that occurs where you are kind of turning card draw into value. Like let's say you are in the loop and you have a Cinccino in play.
Yeah.
The fact that you can discard any card from your hand to draw 2 cards basically means that you can discard any card from your hand to get a supporter of choice into your hand. Because if you use Cinccino's Make 2, for example, you will draw 2 cards, and since your deck essentially is an infinite supply of Eldegoss plus DTE, the 2 cards you will draw will be Eldegoss and DTE in some capacity. Pyukumuku kind of helps with this, but I guess we'll touch upon that later.
Yeah.
So basically, if you have if you have a Cinccino in play, it basically means that any card you can discard, you can draw 2, and any 2 cards you can draw are via Seeker effect, like an effect that lets you get a supporter of choice. So basically, if you have a Make 2 in play, any card in your hand can be seen as like any supporter from your discard pile. And with Tower of Darkness, it works very similar. Actually, if you look at the stream game, in the game 1, in the last turn before my opponent scooped game 1, I was in this loop, and I will explain the loop a little bit later, but I was in the loop, and he uses boss's orders on my Umbreon on the bench. So I need to channel, because he's kind of like forcing me to do something, because he is actually playing a boss. But I just use my tower, and I draw 2 cards. And the cards I draw are always going to be Eldegoss and Double Turbo. And Eldegoss Double Turbo equals Channel, or any supporter really, but in this case, of course, it's Channel. So basically, he uses his boss, and I use one single strike energy, not single strike energy, one single strike card to draw 2. And the 2 cards that I draw will let me get any supporter from my discard pile, which nullifies his boss because it's a channel, and I get into the loop and heal the damage. So basically, I can counteract his boss play with his boss trades for any single strike card in my deck, which is of course a pretty advantageous trade because I have more single strike cards left, and I have more single strike cards left than that he has bosses. So I think when I was thinking about this Elder Ghost loop, you really have to understand that card draw actually gives you resources. And of course, when you have a deck, when you have cards in your deck, card draw will
Always be
obviously give you
resources, yeah.
resources, right? Like if you're playing Arceus and I don't know, you play a Melanie and you draw 3, it's obviously those 3 are gonna be these or Pokemon or Scoop Nets or ball search cards or stadiums. Like it's obvious when you have cards in your deck that the cards you draw from your deck are gonna be useful resources to play the game. But with the Elder Ghost loop, you're basically making it so that at first you just have your 60 card deck, and when you draw all 60 cards, the rest of your deck is basically an infinite chain of this Elder Ghost. So if you can actually draw more cards, you can actually recover more resources. So now getting into the loop stuff, right?
Yeah, the
So
fun stuff, right?
the fun stuff. So when you are using this Elder Ghost and you want to heal every turn, let's say you want to play a Cheryl every turn or a Cheer and Scare every turn, you would need to have some way to draw cards because, like I said, you need to draw the Elder Ghost and the DTE
Yeah.
together to get one supporter from choice from your discard pile and continue this cycle. So you would usually need some kind of draw engine in play, like I said, Chinchino, guess Tower, by Barrel. There's a number of ways you could think about having some kind of draw engine in play. But the issue with having a draw engine in play, the tower can get lost in the stadium war, and having Chinchinos in play means to have this loop means you are always going to have boss targets. So when I was thinking about ways to use this Eldegoss loop to infinitely heal something, you could use any VMAX. Like you could use Doikis or Overnight or whatever, and you could have it active. You also need a way to pivot because you need free retreat to get into the Eldegoss. But if you are using some kind of supplementary draw engine to make sure you draw enough cards to actually play a free supporter every single turn, you have this issue where you can just get bossed like 4 or 5 times. And that is very disadvantageous because it means you cannot give up early game prizes. Because let's say you are playing some kind of draw engine to reach a loop. But if you use like 2 or 3 Snorlaxes to set up or any other setup type of cards, then it means that if you have this draw engine on your bench and they have 4 bosses left and they have 4 prizes left, they can just boss 4 times. And if you don't have the draw engine in play, if you cannot loop without a draw engine in play, it means that your loop doesn't work. So that's kind of how I came to. That's the first big reason why I really liked using the Umbreon, because the Umbreon actually has a very interesting way. I mean, if you've watched the stream game, you'll see exactly how it works. But basically, instead of using a Cheryl to heal every turn, you want to set up 2 Umbreons, and the second Umbreon doesn't have to be an Umbreon, but it's just deck building wise more efficient to only play 1 VMAX line. So you have 1 Umbreon with an air balloon because free retreat, and you have 1 Umbreon with Sun and Moon badge, which prevents it from, which makes it so that it can't be bossed. Then you let the Umbreon with Sun and Moon badge take a hit, and on your following turn you'll use Birdkeeper to pivot it. And Birdkeeper here is like a very essential card because both the switching effect and the card roll are what makes this loop work. Because like I said, you need to pivot to use Eldegoss every turn, and the Birdkeeper provides the pivot on the Sun and Moon badged Umbreon. And also over the course of 2 turns, you'll need to draw 4 cards because you want to use a quote unquote free supporter, and you're only drawing 2 cards for card roll at the start of your turn. So over the course of 2 turns, you'll need to draw 2 extra cards, because having 4 cards means drawing 4 cards means, like I said earlier, getting 2 free supporters. So the card draw from Birdkeeper is also essential. So you'll use the Birdkeeper to pivot into the second Umbreon with Air Balloon. You'll draw the cards, which you actually you need the card draw to generate more supporters. and then you'll float up into use float up from Eldegoss to put it into your deck, and then you'll let the Umbreon with Air Balloon, which you now have active, tank another hit. So both your Umbreon with Badge on the bench and your active Umbreon with Air Balloon both tank one hit. And then on the next turn, you'll use Eldegoss to get a Cheryl, and you'll heal both, and then you'll go back into the Umbreon with Badge. And at the start of the loop, you actually need one of these two supporters. And you need, and you pick up the supporter for the following turn. But like I said, even if you don't have Birdkeeper or Cheryl in hand, because of the way because of the way Eldegoss loop works, if let's say you don't have Cheryl and you don't have Birdkeeper in hand when you get into this loop, it's also fine to have Tower of Darkness into play and have one single strike card in your hand. That is because that's something you kind of have to understand about this loop. Tower in play and having a Flannery in hand is actually that means that the Flannery is essentially a VS Seeker. That's like that's maybe a little bit hard to conceptualize, to like visualize, to like see how that works, but it does actually work that way. When you have Tower of Darkness in play, every single strike card you have in hand is actually a Versus Seeker. And to do this loop, you'll need, at the start of the loop, you need either Birdkeeper or Cheryl, and then you pick up the card for next turn every turn. But because every single strike card is essentially a Versus Seeker, you will have like a lot of gas, like you have a lot of ways to have like the starting support. And then one more important detail about this loop is, even though Birdkeeper draws enough cards, quote unquote, right? It draws over the course of 2 turns, including the card. You draw 2 cards per turn, and you draw 3 cards from Birdkeeper, so you will draw 5 cards.
Yeah.
But what actually is a problem here is that Birdkeeper draws all the cards in the 1 turn, but you want to draw 1 extra card each turn. So you kind of have this issue where, even though Birdkeeper draws 3 cards, you draw them all in one go, and you won't have deck. And Cheryl, you'll draw 0 cards, but on that turn you also want to draw 1 card. So your card draw is kind of like all in one go, instead of divided over those 2 turns. And to kind of fix that issue, you actually need to use Pyukumuku, because the Pyukumuku, it draws a card, but it also puts itself back into the deck. So there's no net gain.
No,
so you would think, like, well, how does that really help you? But the way it helps you is, on the turn you Cheryl, you kind of draw 1 extra card, but you also put 1 extra card into your deck. So you get the extra card draw, like kind of in advance, you could say. And then on the turn you Birdkeeper, you'll have 1 extra card in deck. But because you're playing Birdkeeper, you're drawing more than enough cards. So you're drawing back into the Pyukumuku, so you'll have the Pyukumuku for the turn you Cheryl. So the Pyukumuku kind of lets you like draw a card during the turn you Cheryl. And even though it's a net gain, there's no net gain. But you kind of even out your card draw a bit more, which is kind of, I think it's really interesting how that actually works out, right?
I think this is also where I hope I can add something, because I think this is where it's become really interesting, and also leans into the reason why Umbreon was also chosen for this as well. Because you use the Tower of Darkness as a Versus Seeker, or any fuel for that, which now also includes the Umbreons themselves being single strike.
Yeah,
and Umbreon.
I think you already said, like, we're using every aspect of this Umbreon. Like, we are using the cards in every way.
Every possible way. And you can attack with it, like when you play against Mew. The ability is not even the most thing you actually play it for. It's just a really nice bonus. It has 2 retreat, good hit points, it's single strike, perfect.
yeah, it's kind of like the ability is obviously amazing, but it's like more of like a nice bonus, I guess. But the ability is super good. It's like cards like these, like Lux Regiel, Level X, and Lycanroc, like cards with these abilities have been like on the top of the meta before. So it's obviously a super strong ability, and we do use it, but it's not even like the main reason. So the tower, like, that's also why we play the 4 towers, because because both in the loop, like when you are in the loop, card draw actually. So that's like something that you have to realize. Card draw when you are in the loop actually generates resources. So that is one thing to keep in mind, and also there's like this caveat because I'm keep saying when you are in the loop, when you are in the loop, and
Exactly.
so that's the difference between like Eldegoss and Lusamine, because Lusamine, for those who don't know, Lusamine would get 2 supporters from your discard pile into your hand, and of course Lusamine itself was a supporter, so you could get Lusamine and another supporter, and so you also had this infinite chain of supporters. But Lusamine always worked, and it always worked by itself. There was like no required scenario that you had to set up. But with Eldegoss, for this loop to actually completely work, you need to have drawn your entire deck, and
Yeah.
that is something that it doesn't happen just by itself, right? You actually have to, like, if you watch back the stream games against Arceus, and like in round 9 I also played against Arceus, and I won, but my opponent was playing well, and it can be challenging to draw your whole deck. I think Stefan also mentioned that when you draw your whole deck and you also have to get into this very specific situation. Sometimes you need shopping center.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need like some other. Sometimes you price the one Eldegoss, so you need to get it out of your prices. Sometimes you need to really be careful with your energy, with your double turbos. You need to be very afraid of Marnie. And the main engine we used was Snorlax because it's super good turn 1, and when you get into the loop, you're never gonna give up any more prizes. So even if you give up 5 prizes against Arceus, when you're in the loop, you'll give up 0 prizes. So it's fine to use 3 or even 4 Snorlaxes in a game against. I think in my round 9, I actually used the 4th Snorlax, and my opponent was like kind of surprised, like, "Oh, you play full 4." So, yeah, actually, we played full 4 because it's just so helpful, and
The
it's
card is so
completely
good.
fine.
And I
Yeah,
also think, Sander, this is a good point to kind of branch out to the rest of the list a little bit because
yeah,
obviously, as you mentioned a few times now, Snorlax is a really good card and a core piece in this deck as well to make it run and race towards the loop, especially against Arceus, because there the objective is very clear: you win on the loop. Mew, you never really get there, like because that's
yeah,
not the plan. You do different things, and against
yeah.
Malamar, the thing is somewhere in between. So let's go over a few more cards in the list. So I would like to point out a few. Like we talked about Birdkeeper, how it works very well, and then it was not even in the first iteration. It only came later. Then Starly was a card all of a sudden because it plays so well into Birdkeeper, and
Yeah,
and
and with double turbo.
and with Double Turbo. I think in my run at least I use Starly more often, paying the energy cost than actually
Yeah,
using Birdkeeper for it.
yeah, I use Starly a lot. So I guess getting into the rest of the deck,
Yeah.
because now I think it's kind of obvious what we do against Arceus. Against Arceus, there's some things to keep in mind.
So
Excuse
indeed,
me.
you have to loop
Like
indeed. Yeah.
the path to the peak will stop Eldegoss, so you need to win the Stadium War. And also Arnie can be a bit dangerous. So a lot of the times to really set up the late game situation. Oh, that kind of explains the Zinnias resolve in the deck. I think it's
Indeed.
called Zinnias.
So yeah,
Because
indeed, Sinius, indeed.
we use the Ultra Ball and the Quick Ball to filter the deck, set up, and also get more card draw from Snorlax. But what's also really important that in the late game you want a very small hand. You don't want a hand. You don't want like 10 cards in hand, and 5 of those 10 cards are like unplayable cards.
Indeed.
Because if you get Marnied, even though whenever you get Marnied when you're in the, you will draw for sure back into Eldegoss and TTE, so that's
Yeah.
nice. But if you have like 5 out of your 10 cards be like unplayable, unwastable cards, like not cards you can just put into play for free without any negative effect, that's really detrimental because it makes the Marnie path way more dangerous. So in the late game, you really want to use your Ultra Balls and Quake Balls to discard specifically the unplayable cards to play around Marnie. So we wanted to have a healthy amount of discard cards, like we play 4 Quake Ball, 3 Ultra Ball, because those are also obviously very strong with Snorlax, because you can filter your hand and draw more with Gorman dice. But then sometimes you don't always draw your deck in the perfect order, right? Sometimes you'll draw all your
No.
Ultra Balls, and you'll draw like your important cards alongside Ultra Ball, and you don't want to discard like your towers, for example, with Ultra Ball because you want to win the Stadium War. So sometimes you get into like awkward positions where your draw just doesn't work out perfectly. So having like one supporter in your deck, as we play Eldrago's, you can recover the supporter later on, or you can use it multiple times. Having the one Zinnias, not only because it's a good draw supporter against the Italian engine, and it's a good draw supporter against Mule, it also to have like a very flexible, recoverable way to discard cards, really lets you set up your late game hand. Like it's like I think the most difficult part of the loop is actually first of all drawing through your entire deck, but also setting up your hand to be super robust against Marnie, and having the one Zinnias. You like if you draw like the top percentage of your like if your variance works out well, you don't really need. But having like this one option that you can use either multiple times, or you can discard it early, get it back later when you unplayable cards later on. I think the one Zinnias was like a nice addition, was pretty late addition to the deck too.
Yeah.
And I think we saw like Robin Schultz play Zinnias in Urshifu in Liverpool, so I already like knew it was like not a terrible card with close deck list. Your opponent wouldn't necessarily be playing around like the effect. It's like
No,
not it
indeed,
felt like a
it works out well.
nice. It's both a safety net. It's a draw supporter, so it's never too bad. And with close deck lists, and we expected a lot of Inteleon, a lot of decks that play 5 or 6 Pokemon into play. A lot of Mew do that, so it seemed like a nice card. So
Yeah.
to now get into the second portion, why Umbreon is so amazing. The first part is that you can set up a loop without exposing yourself to boss targets, because your draw engine is actually the bird keeper. And with any other way to do the Eldegoss loop, you would need some kind of draw engine in play that is a boss target.
Yeah.
So with Umbreon, you can do the loop without a boss target. But the second part about Umbreon that is super amazing is the fact that it can attack and it can one-shot Mews.
Indeed,
So
it can just take out Muse, which makes it into a primal Groudon, essentially, right?
yeah,
That
it
was
can take
the
up
really
Mews.
fun part. Yeah.
It can also attack against Malamar. It can it's also a attacker, and even the energy that you attach to it to attack, the single strike energy, if you're not planning to attack, you can discard them to tower. So it was like when you play the deck and when we were building the deck, felt like such a lean package, because every card that you play that helps in one matchup, if you don't need them, they are the tower fodder, which is valuable to draw through your deck and valuable late game to get more supporters. So against some matchups where the loop doesn't work, which are matchups where your opponent has the one-shot potential, like single strike, like rapid strike Monomar, like Suicune.
Yeah.
Against those decks, we actually had a different game plan, because we actually wanted to. I would say against Arceus, the game plan isn't really like a control game plan, right?
No.
Like doing this loop, there's not really a control element. But
No.
against some other matchups, you actually do play as a control deck. You have, like, I would say, the main game plan of the deck is more of like a infinite loop, like style approach, and then you play as a pseudo control deck against Mew and against Suicune and against Malamar. Because against Mew, we played the double Evoltal because we were already playing the triple double turbo energy, so pretty easy to find energy and Evoltal together. We also play Rosans to even recover it. You can potentially attack 3 times with Evoltal using Rosans. That's also the game plan against like Gengar single strike and against other single strike decks that use a lot
Ooh,
of special energies, of
I
course.
like you mentioned Roseanne, Sander, also here. This is
Yeah.
also where it becomes fun against Malamar. That was something I noticed. And then also, I think you're walking towards it. That's also why we played the. Maybe some people find it odd that we played 2-1 Jolteon, say?
Yes.
Because,
So the Jolteon. I mean, I think it has been like a card that is on the radar. People like know that it is like a good card against the Italian engine, but it always seems a bit. It's very difficult to set up, right?
yeah.
because you specifically need the memory capsule, and you need a stage 1 with a specific tool. And unlike Garbotoxin, which was extremely good, but Garbotoxin worked with Floatstone, and it was never bad to have 4 Floatstone. But with Jolteon, it only works against a portion of the meta. You need like very specific cards to set it up. People know that it could be maybe like something decent, but for this deck, it works perfectly because not necessarily against Arceus. You could see again in the stream game, I set up the Jolteon. It is a nice bonus, but they just boss KO it and it's gone. It is like a threat. Like if they don't do anything against it, it is a very strong card. So it forces them to spend resources to get rid of it. I think in my second game in the stream match, I benched Eevee, even though I already discarded my Jolteon and I only play 1. But it was still so threatening that my opponent still boss KO'd my Eevee because it makes the Inteleon engine completely stop in its tracks, and the Inteleon decks don't play that roll draw supporters, so they have like no real pressure without the Intel engine. But more specifically, against Suicune and against Rapid Strike Malamar, getting the Jolteon in play and combining it with the Marnie, so we played 1 Marnie. Getting Jolteon in play and playing Marnie kind of ruins their whole hand. And for example, Suicune, even fleet-footed, doesn't work under the Jolteon and the Ludicolo, because without Jolteon they could double Ludicolo in 1 turn, and then they could reach on an Umbreon. But because of the Jolteon, when you get Jolteon in play and you Marnie them, so they cannot build up in hand full of ways to deal with it. Against Malamar, it's the same. Their whole engine doesn't work. Going Jolteon plus Marnie and then having just an Umbreon with a big charm on it
makes it almost invincible.
Yeah, it can actually sweep their field, and it's really nice that you just have to play this Umbreon pack. This Jolteon package, and Umbreon itself already is like a completely fine functional attacker. It's a very strong attacker. You can even gust. You have the Chevel, so if they try to two-shot it under the Jolteon lock, you can just heal. You have the Rosans to get back the energies, so you can just build up another attacker pretty easily. And
I found something here that was very interesting when I played my 1 game against Malamar. So I found out a really good idea. The reason also why 2-1 Jolteon is really good.
Yeah.
Against Malamar, you try to bench both Eevees. You evolve 1 and put the tool on 1. Because we know that Malamar typically only plays 1 boss. We're not really afraid of the escape rope here because you can promote other stuff. But in this particular case, if they boss KO your Jolteon, Rosan's gives you exactly 1 more because you can get back to all the pieces you miss, and then you put it in play the second time, and then it sticks.
Yeah, the Rosans is I tried Rosans in Control, and I always found it like a little bit mediocre. But in this deck, Rosans gets back like all the important cards that you would want. Like also with Rosans, it's so super nice that you can get back single strike cards that you can then discard to tower.
Yeah.
Like if you think about Rosans and you get back, let's say 3 single strike cards because we don't play a single strike tool. Getting back 3 single strike cards, but you shuffle them into your deck. Mm-hmm. If you would discard those 3 cards, you would draw 6 cards. So, but you have to draw those 3 cards, so you are netting, you're drawing 6 cards, but you also have to draw into those single strike cards that you shuffled in the first place. So that's -3 and +6. So if you use Rosans and you shuffle in 3 single strike cards, if you have enough time to discard those cards to the tower, you basically use Rosans as like a Hapu, like a draw 3.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it is slightly worse because you are drawing those cards over the course of 3 turns by using the tower, right? So it is not. It's like, but in the like, you can use it as a recovery card, and you can pick extra cards that you don't like necessarily need. Like, let's say you want to recover a tool and you want to recover a Jolteon. Like, let's say you want to recover Memory Capsule and Jolteon. You can just pick up another single strike energy and another tower, and the single strike energy in the tower advantageous to the deck because when you draw them, they will draw more cards when you have tower in play. So Rosans is a recovery card and a card draw card in the same thing, and it recovers very specific cards that no other card can recover. Mm-hmm. So I would say Rosans like at its best in this deck. So you use every use it. You use the recovery part in every way possible, and you kind of use it as a pseudo card draw card to a sense. It's really really cool.
Yeah, it's really max value, just like the Umbreon again. Like this deck really brings out the best of a lot of cards, I think, and really makes you possible to just use every single aspect of a card that you otherwise wouldn't. Um,
Yeah.
is there? So I think when I look over the list, I think we've gone through most of the things now, Sander. Unless there's something you really want to point out here at the end about the
Yeah.
list.
Maybe 2 or 3 small details. So I think you already mentioned the Starly.
Yeah.
It was also, when we were building it, when I was building the deck,
Mhm.
um, just going over potential cards to include the Starly. When I started considering it, it actually made a lot of sense because there's a decent amount of decks in the format that don't play Marnie, and against those decks, of course, the effect of Starly is very strong. Like Mew, I played against Mules that played Marnie. I actually a Mew player
Yeah.
in the day one. I used Starly and he Marnied me. I was like, oh.
Oh
But
no.
I still won that round because I didn't
Fair.
afford to like give up a couple of one prizes.
So
But
yeah.
so the Starly, it's fine against Mew. It's fine against Urshifu. It's fine against a couple different decks, and you already want Birdkeeper for the loop, and you already want Double Turbo. So it's like a card. Like if I wasn't playing the Starly, I would still be playing 3 Bird Keepers and 3 Double Turbos.
Yeah.
So the Starly, you can put it into the deck without, having all of the support cards for Starly, the Bird Keepers and the Double Turbos that you need to attack with it are already in the
Mhm.
deck anyway. And then against Monomar, Abstract Monomar, and Suicune, the Starly is absolutely amazing because
Yeah.
against those matchups, you want to set up this Jolteon. And the thing about the Jolteon is, I think everybody who has ever tried to put the
Mhm.
Jolteon in their deck, it's actually a pretty difficult card to set up right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you need this tool, you need the stage 1, you need the EV. But the Starly is an amazing way to you bench the EV, you Birdkeeper into a Starly, and you instantly have everything you need to set up Jolteon. And the Suicune deck and the Malamar deck, not only do they not play Marnie to disrupt you, but they play very low boss count.
Mhm.
Like the Suicune deck sometimes only plays the 4 cross switchers. And if you get the turn, you couldn't. I've had games where you turn 1 Starly or you turn 2 Starly. Like it's kind of difficult, and they would have to boss the Eevee, which isn't even evolved yet. Because you can also use the Starly to set up the Jolteon and also get a Marnie. So when you evolve the Jolteon, you combine it with Marnie, and then it's
Mhm.
extremely unlikely they have any gusting on the Jolteon. So the Starly really, when the Starly was added to the deck, it really solidified, like it really made certain that the Monomar match and the Suicune matchup are super solid. And against those decks are so weak to Jolteon, you can just actually just outrate them with your Umbreon when you get the Jolteon in play. And you can also reuse Marnie. That's also pretty
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Even though
Very
there's only
good.
one Marnie, you have Eldegoss, so you can use the one Marnie multiple times against Repstrike, Malamar, against Suicune. And you can just kind of clear out their field of attackers, and they can't really chain attackers with the Jolteon in play. So just win. And then uh, one of the I think the latest addition to the deck was the third Flannery, because
Yeah.
we were playing double Flannery and double Bruno. Because I think Bruno is a very strong card in the deck. Because it's a setup card, it helps against getting Marnied in the early game. You go Snorlax, Corbin dies, and they go Marnie KO your Snorlax. If you draw into a Bruno, it's amazing because your Snorlax just got KO'd, and you have a small hand size. So I really wanted to play a lot of Bruno, but in the end we cut one of the Brunos for a third Flannery because
Yeah.
we felt like against. I mean, I think me and Stefan and maybe Mace and some of the other players, we really went over the Mio matchup a lot, and I guess to put it short, I mean it's obvious why Flannery is good against Mio, but
You
we
just
kind
really
of
want to be sure you can hit it when
you
you
want
need
to be
it.
sure that you hit it early. We expected a lot of special energy
Yeah.
builds of Mio, which actually was the case. I mean, I think I played against a couple of Mews that played like the one Psychic,
Mhm.
because I felt like Mews would be playing Marnie or Avery, in their deck, and I felt like those type of Mews would be more likely to be the more special energy reliant Mew, because the more special energy reliant Mew can attack a bit easier with less resources. So I felt like the more quote unquote tacked out Mew decks would be more likely to be the special energy builds. And Flannery is obviously very strong. It's a single strike card, so I guess a card like Flannery is perfect with Tower, because Flannery is either really good or really bad. It's like a card that has very polarized situations where you can either use it and it will be strong, or you cannot use it, or you can use it but it would be it would do too little. And using your supporter to discard like an energy from an Arceus, and maybe an Arceus has like 4 or 5 energies on it, like using your supporter to do something that doesn't impact the board enough, or doesn't impact the board at all, like Flannery is really bad. So Flannery is either super strong or super weak. And when you have the tower, you basically cut off the like you could think about a card as having like a ceiling and a floor.
Yeah.
Like let's say you can think about this with any card. That's also why research is so good, and why a card like Bruno, you don't see it in every deck, because Bruno, when it is good, it is very good. But you also have to keep in mind that some situations it's really bad. So a card you can think about as having it like its maximum potential and its lowest potential. And Flannery is a card that has a very high you can win the game by using a couple Flannerys, but you can also have 2 or 3 Flannerys in hand against the deck without any special energies, and that is worse. It's super bad. But the tower kind of raises the floor of the card.
Yeah.
And in the worst case scenario, you just discard it to draw 2, which is actually a very good effect to have.
It's really good to have indeed.
So Flannery is great with tower, and one thing we noticed in the Mew matchup is that you really want the disruption as early as possible. I think against Mew, you cannot, because against Mew, you actually 100% play basically as a control deck. You play as a control deck that has like this Umbreon finishing touch.
Yeah.
But you cannot really afford to be too passive, because the control, like the late game is all right, but you don't play something like Dusknor, you don't play Hammers. When we were testing Mew, I felt like the games where you, in the first 3 turns, you just sit back and Snorlax and don't do anything to disrupt their field. I felt like those games were not going in the right direction, because what happens against Mew, the way their draw engine works, is if they want to save bosses, switching cards, power tablets, I guess choice band, if they want to save resources in their hand, it means they are drawing less cards with Genesect. So you kind of want to force them to play cards from their you want to force them to dig, to put pressure on. Let's say you're playing against Mew and they attach 2 Fusion Strike energy to a Malouetta and they start hitting. Just as an example, if you don't play any Flanneries and you just let them hit with that one Malouetta for 2 or 3 turns, it means you don't force them to draw cards, because they just have an attacker in play. They don't have to do anything else. They can just keep attacking with this Malouetta. And maybe they have like they have some switching cards in hand, maybe a bot they don't want to play yet, maybe tablets, maybe something else, something important that could be important later on. If you don't pressure their early game attacker, their early game resources, you don't force them to dig, and if you don't force them to dig, it's easier for them to keep their resources in hand. But now let's think about the same situation with the Malouetta, I think for 140 on turn 1. If you respond to it with a Flannery instantly, and then on the next turn with another Flannery, now they are in a situation that if they want to put pressure on you and take prizes, they either have to, and their hand is like they have some switching cards or maybe some tablets in their hand. They cannot both draw cards with Genesect to find new energy to put pressure into attack, and keep their resources in hand. So you kind of put them into a rough spot. And I felt like against Mew, it's very important to keep making them find new energy cards as early as possible to keep attacking, because
that's basically what makes you win the game here.
Yeah, but I also felt like their engine kind of works in a weird way with the Genesect that if they cannot. It's not like a Zoroark engine or an Inteleon engine that picks the cards from their deck. If they want to draw cards, they need to play cards from their hand as well. Sometimes the fact that they have to play cards from their hand in the early game, after you discarded their first couple energies, means that they won't have enough resources late game. So I felt in the testing, I think you did also a lot of testing in the meal matchup. It just felt super important to have like a lot of disruption, to just have some way to disrupt them early game with either Flannery, Pulse, the Eviltal, and anything really.
You pick
And
it.
I
You
mean, I
pick
played
basically.
against. Yeah, I was super happy that we were playing 2 Bruno, 2 Flannery, and the last change was going to the triple Flannery. And I played against 10 meals, so I was really happy that we swapped and played the third Flannery. And
It
I
really
think it's
improved the game. I think.
yeah,
I think also, Sander, now is the time we go into like, so a lot of people, the first thing they saw this deck, they're like, yeah, but this deck is bad to A, B, C, D, and then insert a lot of cards. And as I already signaled at the beginning of this video, yeah, this was a heavy reliant meta call on what we expected to see. So I would like to mention a few obvious cards first, and then maybe just you can reflect on briefly how this would why we decided for this deck or not. We already mentioned that Whimsicott is absolutely terrible. It's what we would deem as an auto loss. They attack, we scoop. That's basically the game plan. Very solid. I also realized, not something we talked about before, but also during my run, Blissey is terrible. Don't play against it. You just lose. Anything that can consistently one-shot Umbreon, basically, where you have quote-unquote no chance of stopping it, is bad. Now, for the more intricate cards we expected not to see, that involves specifically 2, I would say. One, let's start with the worst one first. We didn't expect Tool Scrapper to be an issue. The count Tool Scrapper was typically, it was played, but not enough. You could already see like, oh, if I can Tool Scrapper the badges, combine it with a boss, I win. So, in short, that was what we hoped did not happen. And the other card that we also would find bad often, but I would not say as bad, correct me if I'm wrong, is Escape Rope. Like, because we had a way around it. You could expand the loop to 3 Umbreons, or simply have an extra card to throw up. That happens often, that if you went early enough into the loop, you can dump another Snorlax, we can use the Jirachi, or anything else that could work as a fodder if they escape roped. So those things we hope not to see too much. So anything I've missed there of obvious things, Sander?
no, yeah, I think those were the like easy cards that people could play like maybe one card of.
Yeah.
Of course, there's like super random stuff like I guess, like Rayquaza.
Of course,
some
you don't want to meet that, and I don't even think you want to meet something like Charizard V-Star or something like that.
yeah, I think anything that anything that can one shot and that are, because against we prepared for some decks that could one shot us, but against the decks that could one shot us, we had this secondary game plan involving the Jolteon, involving attacking with Umbreon, involving the fact that we played triple Flannery, double Eviltal.
Yep.
Like we could, and like for example, I played against maybe like Gengar, and I think Gengar, it's not necessarily a good matchup, which you can still bench the Umbreon, use the ability to drag up. Like you have a lot of like quote unquote bosses.
Yeah.
You can just play the control game plan with triple Evoltal of Yago Sands against Gengar and give up 5 1-prizers, and then you can actually potentially still attack with 1 Umbreon when they don't have single strike energy in one shot. But yeah, anyways, so against decks that our secondary game plan is not very effective. There are, I guess, some very off-meta decks that both plan A and plan B wouldn't work.
There's one meta deck that we also really couldn't deal with, I believe. That's one thing to figure out later. Many Arceus variants were totally fine, unless they compared it with or combined it with Rapid Strike Urshifu. Then it became pretty bad.
Yeah. So I guess that is the Urshifu is something we should, I guess,
I think that's where we're gonna end on today as well. Also, so let's move over Urshifu, because that's of course The deck that
Yeah,
won, it plays
yeah,
itself
it,
super
it
well.
won. It placed 5 times in the top 8. I think Urshifu has shown itself that Urshifu is good against Arceus and Moltres is good against Mew. So, and
Seems
Urshifu,
good. Seems good. Yeah.
I've always thought that Urshifu is like on the same power level as just as a card as
Yeah.
Mew, and I guess Genesect is the better card than Mew anyway. But as the Mew deck and as Arceus, like Urshifu is just such a strong card. The
And
VMAX.
no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
So I guess against the Urshifu deck, we had a pretty different game plan because they also don't play Marnie. And one thing about Urshifu is that if you attack with Urshifu with Guild Trust or with Rapid Flow, those attacks, even though they are very strong attacks, very efficient attacks, they they do cost resources to continuously apply pressure. With Guild Trust, if you don't have a switching card, and you might say, yeah, but Urshifu has switching cards, yes, but they don't have infinite switching cards.
True.
If you Guild Trust and you don't, at some point, if you run out of switching cards, you're only doing 30 damage. And of course, Gmax Rapid Flow, while it is an extremely strong attack, it does cost you energy to attack to use it. And even though the output is great, the resources it costs again are finite for the Urshifu deck. So against Urshifu, if you can respond to their Guild Trust and their Rapid Flow with Cheryl, and then again, you might think, yeah, well, there's only 2 Cheryl in the deck. But if you have drawn your entire deck and you have a tower in play, any single strike cards actually equals a VS Seeker.
Indeed.
So that's again something important to kind of keep in mind, that it works like that. And so you can actually outlast Guild Trust and Rapid Flow. Because one of the problems against Urshifu is what we found, especially against like Arceus Urshifu, which both of us didn't play against, but it was like one of the more fringe decks that some people played, and we tested against it. One of the issues against an Urshifu combined with a partner that can actually apply a constant pressure, unlike Urshifu that can't really Guild Trust every turn without spending resources, or can't Rapid Flow every turn without spending resources. To combine it with Arceus, the Arceus will hit 200, and when the Umbreon goes to when you try to do like the standard loop, the Rapid Flow threatens the 2-shot on the bench even without needing a boss, because the 200 from the Arceus and the 120 will 2-shot an Umbreon. Yeah. And like I said, like basically with this deck, when an Umbreon VMAX gets KO'd, you more or less, you lose the game.
Yeah. Simple as that. Simple as that.
As simple as that. So if you have some other attacker that can stream attacks without any drawbacks, and then combine it with the threat of the Urshifu finishing off the 2-shot with a Rapid Flow, that is definitely problematic. But we surmised that the Dark Inteleon Urshifu deck, which ended up being like the most popular Urshifu deck by far. If you go one Umbreon with Air Balloon and you draw your deck and they don't play Hand Disruption, you could potentially outlast them if they don't have a secondary attacker that can stream attacks.
Exactly.
And I think you played against Alex Szymanski, and I think what you told me is he figured out that he could attack with Medicham.
Yeah.
The second attack of Medicham.
Exactly.
Which does 100.
And then combine it with the Inteleon pings.
Yes, and I think he played double quick shooting.
Yeah.
And I think even 100 with double quick shooting, which is 140, already threatened the finishing it off with Gmax Rapid Flow with Passimian and more quick shootings and maybe even Scuba Mat.
Yeah, and he used actually Passimian was prized, but he did use Telescopic Sight, which has the same effect.
Telescopic Sight. Yeah. That is of course also like against Urshifu when they start to use different attackers. Actually, I don't think many people knew this, but I think using the basic V
Hmm.
would also be a very annoying attacker,
I
right?
think that's actually the worst they could possibly do. I was made aware of this by Brian DeVries. He said, "Okay, yeah, so I play
Yeah.
Urshifu,
I also think I also thought
and
that was the
yeah,
best attacker that he could use, the
yeah,
the basic V, which
yeah,
is like 100 furious
yeah,
blows.
yeah, and it just does 150 flat. So they would just keep
Yeah,
pushing that attack until they can just evolve and rapid flow for
yeah,
game, basically.
yeah. They can evolve in rapid flow per game because you have to heal every turn, and that
Yeah,
doesn't work. But against Guild Trust is like not an attack that they can really chain.
no,
And of course, Galarian Moltres V, which is also like Gustavo Wada played it.
yeah,
That could also be annoying, but you could potentially win on prizes, even though when you start taking prizes, the baby Moltres becomes an issue.
yes,
But but yeah, there were some cards we considered to improve that matchup, and maybe those are cards you maybe have to play. One card,
if you ever want to play this game in the future, you have to be wary about the counts of say Tool Scrapper and these things,
yeah,
and you don't want to run into
yeah,
Whimsicott and so forth.
yeah. Whimsicott was definitely like a fairly easy auto loss. Like there was nothing you could actually do.
No,
But
nothing.
against Urshifu, one card I think my 61st card was Tool Scrapper in the
Yeah,
Umbreon deck itself to get rid of Telescopic Sight and
yeah.
Choice Bands. Because I felt like those cards were very irrelevant
Or
to
Air Balloon if they played that. That could
or
also be a
or Air
problem.
Balloon, because Air Balloon would make their pivoting a lot easier. Also getting rid of Air Balloon against like
Yeah,
I don't know, by barrel decks or
yeah,
against a lot of like various decks makes the trapping game plan a lot better because, like I said, you have the one boss that you can reuse with Eldegoss, and you have the Umbreon ability itself. It actually came up like a couple times that if you get rid of an air balloon from your opponent, you can actually sometimes win by trapping something. And also,
yeah,
one very good thing about playing Toolscapper in Umbreon deck itself is that you can use it on your own tools. So you
yeah.
can put your Umbreons down with Sun and Moon Badge, and we use the shopping center. I guess we didn't really talk much about shopping center. There's actually a lot of things to talk about shopping center, but basically the easiest, the most practical use of shopping center was simply you put the Umbreons down with Sun and Moon Badge, and then when
Yeah,
you want to go into the loop, you use it to get an onto it.
yeah,
But you can
simple.
actually use Tool Scrapper for the exact same purpose. You scrapper one of your own badges, so you can put an air balloon on. So Scrapper was definitely a very reasonable card. I felt like it was a bit too marginal. You can also get rid of Tool Scrapper because Tool Jammer.
Yeah, yeah,
You can get rid of Tool Jammer, but I didn't. I felt like nobody was going to play Tool Jammer. So and you can beat Tool Jammer, but it is a slight annoyance. So Tool Scrapper makes a lot of sense in the Umbreon deck itself, funnily enough, because you can use it if you don't even if your opponent plays zero tools, you can
yeah.
use Tool Scrapper for your own loop by getting rid of the badges that you use in the early game. So Scrapper and it could help the Urshifu match by getting rid of Telescopic Sight or Choice Band if they play it. But yeah, maybe against Urshifu you need some other type of. I think we talked about maybe playing Togekiss because it has
Yeah.
resistance.
You could even, if they didn't play Dark, even playing Espeon V would have been a version. Like, but
Yeah,
the Dark weakness of Espeon V kind of ruined it. Otherwise, Espeon V was a perfect partner because you could also utilize the Sun and
the
Moon badge.
badge. Yeah, exactly. Because in the loop, the one Umbreon with the badge, you need
Mhm.
it, but the second Umbreon with the air balloon,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be the Umbreon with an air
No.
balloon. The reason we played the Umbreon, we used Umbreon with air balloon is playing a double VMAX line is less consistent. And
Yeah.
what's nice about the Umbreon is you can, like we mentioned a couple of times, you can
Mm.
bench the basic V with a badge and put the air and swap it for an air balloon later. So it's one of the only Vs that is kind of like safe to bench without it being like an easy boss KO for double prizes. And of course, playing a thicker Umbreon line is fine because you uh, play Tower of Darkness. So the
Exactly.
excess Umbreons you can discard, and you can play around Escape Rope by having triple Umbreon in play, or giving up one less prize card. Like if your opponent has taken 4 prizes and you know they play Rogue, you can just bench a one prizer and it can be fine. Also, I think
Yeah.
you mentioned you lost a game against Echoing Horn.
Yeah.
I think David Roodhoff also lost a game against an Echoing Horn. from
Mm.
Arceus,
Yeah.
I would like to add, because against Mew, they play it, and against Mew you can kind of play around it by using Rosens to at least shuffle in your Umbreon if you get the
Yeah.
time to do it. But against Arceus, if you know they play it, you can win against it. It's
Yeah.
completely fine.
But you need to know it's there. So
But if you don't know that they play it, it can be a very nasty surprise. So it's
indeed.
that I would say that's not a card that you lose to, but if you don't know about it, you definitely can lose to it for sure. Like the stream game, I think game 2 on stream, if my opponent played Echoing Horn, he would have won that game, the second
Yeah.
game. But
But yeah, sometimes you just have to put
I
up your
saw,
Umbreon and pray that they don't play the counter card for you. That's what happened often.
yeah, I mean, I think the counter cards were like pretty specific, and not all of them worked flawlessly. Like I think for
Yeah.
sure I would if I were to play the deck again, I would there's a couple cards that we considered and we didn't play, so I would consider them again. I think Tool Scapper
Yeah.
in the Umbreon itself is definitely a logical card because like I said, there's some relevant tools you can hit. There's sometimes you can win with getting rid of air balloons and that makes your trapping game plan stronger. And
Yeah.
you can use it yourself the same way you use shopping center. And then I would also really think about some way to improve to make the Urshifu matchup more manageable. I think like stylistically, I think a Cheryl healing deck with Eldegoss because I played like quad Corviknight before, like a pretty long time ago,
Yeah.
couple like half a year ago, maybe even longer. And that deck was super good against Urshifu. I feel like this type of approach where you actually use an VMAX with a lot of HP to soak up hits and then heal it. I don't think it's like necessarily like the core game plan is not bad against Urshifu. I think that is a pretty nice thing. But I felt like the way we went about it wasn't necessarily good against the Urshifu's deck. The Urshifu's
No,
the
I think
perfect deck.
the focus was way too much on Mew, which Umbreon is the better choice for
Yeah,
obvious
yeah.
reasons.
Let's say you were playing like a 1-1 core that also
Yeah.
really improved the Urshifu matchup because Corviknight cannot get hit by Inteleon pings.
No.
So that also kind of because the Urshifu matchup, some of the small numbers add up, and sometimes it can, like you said, you played against Alex Szymanski, and
Yeah.
it becomes a pretty complicated game of like, where is the breaking point? Where is the two-shot possible? Where isn't it possible? And we definitely didn't play any like dedicated decks for the Urshifu matchup. But I think if I were to like look at the deck another time, I would definitely try to figure out something for that matchup. Then I guess the last possible tech card we were thinking about, which was a card that was a bit more, uh, a bit more strange, but the card I was considering was Mine.
Yeah.
Just one Mine because you have percent to recover it. Winning the Stadium War is relevant. A lot of the times you're putting the towers in play and the shopping center in play, and your opponent is trying to counter those. And then when you also have Mine to kind of end on, it can be actually I felt like in a lot of the games I was playing, it can actually stick. And when a Mine sticks and you have these Umbreons to gust and you have Eldegoss boss to gust,
Yeah.
the Mine sticking is extremely strong. And the Inteleon engines, even though they have scoop up nets, they use those nets to reset their shady dealings and draw the cards they need.
Indeed, it kind of, and it also ruins your own loop, of course. So you have to go straight
Yeah,
forward for that plan if you choose to play
yeah.
Galarmine.
So with Mine, the reason why, because you also need like we mentioned when we went over the loop, you also need a pivot to have some way to retreat into the Eldegoss, put Eldegoss into your deck over and over and over. Having a pivot is vital to the loop. So that's why Mine is kind of counterintuitive, because if you put it into play and it doesn't work out well for you, you are actually disrupting your own loop. But
Yep.
it definitely, because the deck is like the plan A is using this loop, and the plan B is being this like pseudo control deck
Yeah.
in certain matchups. But the Mine felt like a card that even as a one-off could be very valuable, but it felt like it actually counteracted your plan A, so that felt like not a great way to build a deck for the first tournament of the deck.
No, I think Sander, this is a lot of things, and I hope also the viewers here, listeners, viewers, what they prefer, have learned a lot about the deck as well. And if not, you can always go and view Sander's stream match back. It's a really nice watch. You really get to see the loop fold out in its perfect form. But then again, I hope that you enjoyed watching this. And again, also to you, Sander, thank you so much for taking the time here. And I also hope you enjoyed talking a little more about this wonderful creation of Umbreon Wall Stall Control.
I mean, I can't say I enjoyed the weekend too much because I was so sick. Like, I was not in great shape. But I mean, I like the deck so much. I think when I came to you with the deck, I was like, I'm playing this deck for sure. It's just too much. Like, building the deck and like the way like everything works together, I think it's so much fun to work. Like the way the Pyukumuku enables the loop, the way you use Umbreon in so many ways, the way the single strike engine works, the way Eldegoss works.
It was
Just
amazing.
I think it was just a very fun showcase of what you can do with like draw engines and what you can do with like Eldegoss and what you can do with the VMAX, using it in so many different ways. So
it was amazing.
Thanks to that.
And,
I also think we had some nice long discussions about the deck. So I always like it when a deck, you can go about it in different ways. So you can actually discuss like what strategical approach do we want to take instead of just do we.
Yeah, and
I feel like in Mew, sometimes you're like, do I want to play Rotenphone? Do I want to play Chromatic? And it's like, to me, that's not as, exciting as talking about like which strategical approach do we want to take.
This is a fun note to end on, Sander, actually, because this is also where, so when we play tested this and we couldn't get it to work, we are just going to build Mew Control, right? That was the thing we said the entire weekend. We're just going to play Mew Control, so beware everyone out there, maybe Mew Control.
When we were testing it, we were also talking, you remember, you were constantly bringing up playing Womp Psychic and Shadow Mist.
Yeah, Shadow Mist is good.
Even though that we didn't play it, but the same idea, the whimsical deck is basically the same, right? Instead of Shadow Mist, it is just I don't know, I don't even know what the deck is called.
Yeah, so I'm really so maybe one day, guys, if we find something new, maybe Mew Control is the next thing. So beware.
I guess I guess my last thing is with the Eldegoss loop, there's a lot more possible. You can play Glaceon, you can play Togekiss, you can play this, that, and the other. I think in the next set we get some more card draw cards and like the tracking shoes, the tracking.
Roxanne is a thing next set.
Ooh. Yeah, Roxanne. So I feel like this deck really. That's also why I really wanted to play this deck, because it really showcased the Eldegoss to even more of its potential than when I played the pure control deck in Liverpool.
Yeah.
So, but I think in the future the Eldegoss thing, it's still there, right? You don't necessarily have. Umbreon is just one of the many forms it can
still
take.
relevant.
Eldegoss, it's very you just need the one Eldegoss, and the one Eldegoss actually is infinite Eldegoss.
Yeah.
You need Double Turbo. Double Turbo is a good card. You can use different attackers with it. So I think we'll see some more Eldegoss action, and I think this deck at the very least was like a nice showcase.
It was fantastic, an absolute pleasure to play it as well.
Yes.
And
it was nice to that you decided to play it. And it kind of felt like when we played Boba Fett Break a long time ago.
That was the time. Those were the times.
Yeah.
So guys, beware. There's coming more. Well, everybody could have seen that coming. But again, thank you so much for being here, Sander, and thanks for everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this class in Stefan's Classroom about control, and I hope to see you back for another episode here or another class in Stefan's Classroom. Hey, bye guys. Bye.
Bye.